My name is Onrie'S. You've seen me sell comics. I want to buy this comic.
Too bad, because that comic sucks!
You're watching Onrie'S Comic Mukbang Reviews. Prepare to get banged.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Onrie'S Comic Mukbang Reviews. I'm your host, Onrie'S. It's great to be here with you guys on this wonderful Sunday evening. Still coughing, but getting better. It's been a long week. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. This transition on live stream for live stream sales has been really tough. Switching over and changing up my schedule and everything. Honestly, between that and everything else that I've had going on over the last couple weeks, between this and my grandma passing away and a whole bunch of other things happening, it's been pretty tough. In all honesty, last week or this week, we actually sold her apartment, and this is the apartment that her and my grandfather lived in pretty much my entire life. So this apartment has been a part of my family since I was a kid, since I was like before I was even born. Like, this is the place that my grandparents lived in since they immigrated to America. And so, saying goodbye to it was kind of tough. And I inherited a bunch of things, and it's pretty cool because I got to like hang up a bunch of art in my house and redecorate and do stuff like that. And, like now my grandma lives on, my grandparents' memory lives on in my house, and that makes me very happy. But between that and this transition over to whatnot, it's been a pretty grueling process. Like, I've gone through a couple shows where I haven't sold anything, and when you spend 2 hours showing up for something, and you spend time before that curating a collection for everything, it it's like taking a kick between the legs for sure. And especially since it's been a while since I've done a convention. Like, next week I'll be back on the road at Fan Expo Boston. What's up, Nope? It's I'm definitely feeling it right now. Definitely been dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. Not a lot of imposter syndrome, just dealing with imposter syndrome. It's tough getting on whatnot and completely changing the format of what I've been doing on live sales. But I realize that if I don't make this change now, I don't have a future in live sales. So just kind of trying to figure out what my groove is and figure it out, build my audience one person at a time. And it's tough because I'm finding that there's never really a good or bad time to be on the air. It's just a matter of like when you're lucky. And today I did a whole show where I've been preparing this for months. I even talked about it on here, where I was like, talking about doing a big Spider-Man show, and I sold like a very teeny tiny stack of books, and I have like a whole short box full of Spider-Man books. So I was hoping, considering that the Spider-Man movie came out, that we would have a little bit more traction. But I'm still new at this, and it's going to take time. And on the plus side, although things have been really slow on the sales end, I've been really focusing a lot on writing and making a lot of headway on the Eastern Shin script. And this is the last script of the book, of the series. And so, I'm coming close to, finishing the book. I'm on, in terms of the script, I'm about to start writing the final battle of the entire series. So this is, it's a pretty overwhelming feeling, to be honest with you guys. It's something I've been thinking about for the last 17 years. It's like I've played this battle in my head so many times, and I've read a lot about it, and all these kinds of things. So it's interesting to see it play out and everything. And I've also been taking the time to be with the kids and to have fun with them, and to kind of just keep to myself, I guess. It's been nice to go see Spider-Man Brand New Day with them. We all really enjoyed it very much. And just trying to enjoy life and taking it one step, one day at a time. And of course, one of the things that always helps me out too is reading comics. And one thing I want to tell you guys, I was actually going to do this week's mukbang is more of an in-depth review of John Byrne's entire run on Fantastic Four. But a few things developed this week. First of all, it seems like every single time I think I'm done with John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four, reality reminds me that I'm not. I've read all the mainline issues, so from issues 232 all the way up to 295, but then there are 3 annuals that he worked on too. One of them he fully wrote and illustrated, and I just finished reading it this evening. That is this book right here, the Fantastic Four 17 annual, but he also worked on the 18 and 19 one. So I have the 18 one. I have to find the 19 one. And then once I'm done reading everything, then I'll be ready to do this in-depth look at everything. And what's cool about it is I'm very close friends with Jim Salicrup, who was actually John's editor on Fantastic Four when he was working on it. So he edited, I think, about half of the run. And so I've asked Jim if he would be willing to come on as a guest to talk about his experiences working with John on Fantastic Four, and he was very kind and agreed to it. So I'll actually be seeing Jim this week in Fan Expo Boston. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll arrange a time to come on the air, and you guys can come and hang out and as I do my in-depth review and look into John Byrne's amazing run on Fantastic Four, which honestly, I'm not a big fan of annuals. And we're about to get into the reviews for this week. Typically, I'm not a big fan of annuals because it feels like it's just like, here's a bunch of extra added layered content that's filler for the most part. It doesn't really like add much. I can't really say that I have found a bunch of filler books throughout my career that I would say are, like necessary reads. But I have to give this Fantastic Four annual credit for actually being really well done, because John both wrote and drew this. And most of the books that came out this week was a very light week for new releases, and most of them were annuals. So I've got a lot of experience reading annuals this week. I've done a lot of annual reviews. So I guess we should just get into it. So here we go. We got our first book here, which is the World's Finest Annual. And I wish I could do something about this camera here, but unfortunately I can't yet. It would be really nice if there was some way to get it to show the way it does on the Whatnot shows. But for now, I guess we'll just have to, show it up this way. So this is the World's Finest review, the World's Finest Annual. And I really like this, to be honest with you. I thought this was a really phenomenal story. And it was a phenomenal story because of how it pulls at the heartstrings. For those of you guys who don't read the current World's Finest that's written by Mark Waid, it was launched by Waid and Dan Mora. This kind of this series actually kind of focuses on different eras of a different era of Superman and Batman, but it's in continuity, but it's not in current continuity. So it's like different periods of their careers. And right now, this annual kind of focuses on Pa Kent and Alfred teaming up and talking about fatherhood. So Bruce and Clark, they invite their dads over to this like medieval steakhouse for Father's Day, and both Alfred and Pa are kind of like out of place with each other. Like they both have such different backgrounds, and they're both, Pa Kent's really kind of jabbing and poking at Alfred, but Alfred at the same time is able to kind of hold his own. And all of a sudden there's an emergency that occurs, and Batman leaves, and then Batman's gone for a little bit, so then Superman follows, and they end up in this trap, and the only ones who can save them are Pa Kent and Alfred. And it's a very endearing story. I can't say that my life would be like empty if I didn't read this story, but it just kind of goes to show you that some comics can actually like, get a different type of reaction out of you. It doesn't always have to be serious. It can sometimes be, stories where, you see fathers talking about their sons and how they relate to each other. And I really like that. No, this isn't Suck My Balls. Sorry, Jay. But I really enjoyed this. The art was pretty good. For an annual, this was a pretty entertaining read. I enjoyed it. I thought it was all right. There were some side stories in the end that I like cared a little less about, but they're there and whatever. It's part of the whole thing. To me, annuals just feel like, okay, we have nothing to do right now, so we're just gonna put together this big fat story with a bunch of filler in it. And this is filler for all intents and purposes. This is filler. Like, I can't say that I really needed this story, but we have this story and I enjoyed it. It was not like a drag to read it. And honestly, it's better than some of the other comics I've been reading lately. So I would honestly give this probably a 4 out of 5, just because it was better than I was expecting it to be. And I honestly was not planning on getting these annuals this week. I was like, screw it. But something always happens to me when I'm at the comic store or at any comic shop. I see new books and I'm just like, yeah, the hell, I'll grab it. Let's just check it out, see what's up. I can always resell it if I don't like it. And then, of course, I go on Whatnot for 2 hours and I don't sell shit, but whatever. Hopefully that changes over time. I guess I got to just keep going on. All right, next book we got here is Reborn Ultimate Impact. Reborn Ultimate Impact. So this ties pretty deeply to the Ultimate Comics run that we've been that was revived in 2024. And what happened was there was a run called Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion, which I actually have that book here somewhere. I will show it to you guys. It's hiding. It's being elusive, but I definitely have it. Yes. It's here somewhere. There we go. Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion. So this run takes place in the Ultimate Universe, obviously. And what happens is Miles gets sucked into the Ultimate Universe, in search of his sister who's been kidnapped by the Maker because, the Maker's trying to, reshape shit. So that's what the Maker does. And in the process, there are all these like origin boxes that are basically retrieved by Miles and Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe. And Miles goes back to our reality and, has to go to Iron Man to protect the origin boxes. But then the Spot shows up and, steals all the origin boxes. And now the origin boxes are going to all these random people who are now inheriting all these powers unexpectedly. And each issue is kind of focused on a different character. Like the first issue focused on Miles, the second issue focused on Punisher. And so this issue focuses on Iron Man. And like always, you got kind of like the same sort of stupid narrative where the big hero tries to diminish or minimize what Spider-Man is trying to tell them. Like in Brand New Day, you see that with Black Widow, where she's like, oh, your problems are small potatoes compared to the problems we deal with. It's like, really, bitch, what are your fucking big problems? You can't solve shit. Spider-Man fucking fought Thanos. He punched him in the fucking face. He was around while you were still like fucking doing whatever. Like, this whole small potato shit is stupid. Well, of course, Iron Man's being Iron Man. He's, once again being like, oh, yeah, it's a Spider-Man problem. Oh, it's stupid. I'm dealing with much bigger problems. Like, no, you're not, dude. Listen to him. He's obviously trying to find you. Like, I really hate this whole thing of how they're repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And so, yeah, Iron Man's like ignoring Peter Parker. I mean, not Peter Parker. Miles Morales was trying to tell him about these origin boxes. He's like, oh my God, someone's like, breaking into my shit and, all this stuff. And, of course, it all ties back to what Miles is trying to warn him about. And honestly, I've been sort of just not really enthused with this. I call this the Clack-a-Lack book because in the previous issue there were like two characters who, became one kind of like firestorm, and they had these bracelets on, and they're like, "Oh, thanks for the bracelet, buddy. Let's like connect them. Let's like Clack-a-Lack," and they did that, and then they became, some big beast thing that the Punisher had to like stop or whatever. And this just kind of feels clumsy to me. I don't even know why I'm reading it. I guess it's because I've been reading all the Ultimate stuff. But it's Chris Condon, and everybody really likes him. And I don't know. It's okay. I'm not really like crazy about it. I would say I definitely give this like a 2 out of 5. It's actually no. You know what? I'll be fair. It's an average book. It's just an average book. It gets a 3 out of 5. It's a 3 out of 5. All right, I got 3 more books to review, and then that's pretty much going to be my show for this week. I'm sorry, it's just not a very release heavy week, but we do have a release heavy week this upcoming week, and I'll be broadcasting to you guys from Boston on Thursday evening. So be on the lookout for that. All right, so next book here is Doom Quest number 3, and Doom Quest is another really fun series here by Ryan North, who is the current ongoing on what's it called, on Fantastic Four. Really love the covers on this, and so this cover is obviously Dr. Doom, during the Revolutionary War, and so Doom is trying to basically rewrite history and beat the Brits by developing technology that's way ahead of its time back during the Revolutionary War era. And he decides to then invade Britain and take over and do all these things. But he's in the body of George Washington. Every single issue is like different. Like in issue 2, he was on the Titanic, and so in the next issue he's going to be somewhere else. I don't. There's. He's actually kind of quantum leaping himself throughout history, and so now he's going back into a younger version of himself, which is where we'll see him in the next issue. But love the covers, love the overall arc. I love how much Doom is staying in character throughout all this. This has been a lot of fun. I really love Doom Quest. This was actually one of the only books I was going to pick up this week, and aside from Ultimate Reborn Impact, but this is the one I was really looking forward to. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. It was a really good read. I enjoyed this. Alrighty. And now we got Night Vision Special by Mark Waid, Josh Williamson. And here's something I have to say that I really find interesting about this. The Justice League Night Vision story, the fact that it's written by Mark Waid and Josh Williamson together is fascinating to me, because in my opinion, Josh Williamson is sort of like this era's version of Mark Waid. So seeing them work together on a story is interesting. And, it's a Batman and Lex Luthor, team up book. So I was actually thinking to myself as I was reading this, I'm like, I wonder if they decided that one was going to write all the Batman dialogue and the other was going to write all the Lex Luthor dialogue. And at times that's how I was going about reading it, is like I imagined one writer was writing the other. And honestly, for some reason, I could honestly see Mark Waid writing Lex Luthor and Josh Williamson writing Batman. I don't know why. I just kind of in my head, I was thinking that this is how they would go about this. But it's an interesting one-shot story. I can't say that they're super high stakes here, but it's got an interesting villain. It's what's his name? What's his name? Forgot. He looks like a knight, but he's like something who laughs or something. I forgot. Prometheus. Sorry, his name is Prometheus. My bad. Prometheus is his name. So Prometheus is the main villain of this, and Batman and Lex Luthor have to go into this haunted house, or like this mirror house or whatever, and save a bunch of mercenaries who got stuck in there and all this stuff, and they're trying to save them and all this. And so it's an unlikely team up book, but it works for the most part. What's up, Lorena? How you doing? Honestly, it was okay. I can't say I can't say any of the books that I read this week, aside from DoomQuest and maybe even DoomQuest, are books that I really needed. These are not buzzworthy books. These are not books that are like, holy shit, I can't live without them. But they were decent stories. Like this one was okay. I honestly, I was kind of hoping for more when you have such a powerhouse team up like Mark Waid and Josh Williamson doing like a one-shot special. But it was pretty average, honestly. I'm going to say this is a 3 out of 5. It's not a bad book. It's really beautifully illustrated. It's just like can't say I needed this, Can't say I was like, oh my God, this was amazing. But aside from that, we got one more book to review and then we're done. Like that's how short. That's how few books came out this week. So the final book is Detective Comics Annual number 1, and this was actually a lot better than I was expecting it to be. So it takes place between Batman number 1 and Lobo number 1, and Batman and Lobo are basically forced to team up because Lobo has been put on a job to arrest Batman and bring him before a court, and for the death of an alien who was killed with a batarang. And prior to this happening, Batman was at Alfred's gravestone, just visiting, and all of a sudden, this intimate moment was ruined by Lobo. And it's a good story, I would say. Like, it moves well, and it's paced just fine, sort of like the World's Finest annual. It's good. The stakes are not very high. It's a story that can fall into continuity, but it's not a necessary part of continuity. Like, it's okay. I wouldn't say like, oh my gosh, we needed this, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And then there was another side story in there with Professor Pig, which also really didn't. It's not the best Professor Pig story. It was kind of like seen from the perspective of some kids who were trying to free Batman, who had been captured by Professor Pig, and it was just kind of like, it felt like clunky. It felt very clunky. It was written by Dave Wielgaz, and Fran Mariscal was the artist. The art was okay. But I at times it felt a little too, saturated and difficult to follow. I wasn't really like a big fan of it. It was okay. But the overall story was okay. This is, again, a pretty average book. So, again, we didn't really have a monstrous release week. Most of it was just annuals and, DoomQuest and Ultimate Reborn Impact and this Justice League Night Vision story. So that was it. That was all I had on my pull list for the week. Next week's supposed to be a lot bigger. But, since I'm here, I guess I'll just talk about the other annual I read, which was the Fantastic Four annual. Like, this had a lot of meat on the bone. This felt like a goddamn fucking, Fantastic Four story that you had to read. And the thing I love about John Byrne and what he's done on Fantastic Four, having read pretty much everything he's done on it, John can take really absurd ideas and make sense of them. And particularly in this issue, in this annual, like, the Fantastic Four don't show up for like the first half of this thing. And you're actually wondering as you're reading it, like, what the fuck is going on? It feels like straight up an episode of The Twilight Zone. You don't see any superheroes. You don't see any aliens. You just see a bunch of weird shit happening. And then all of a sudden things unfold, and, you kind of get the idea that something bigger is happening, and there we go. Like it unfolds, and then eventually the Fantastic Four come into it, and then everything gets explained, and it all kind of comes together. And I really enjoyed this annual a lot more than I thought I was going to, because again, I'm not a big fan of annuals. Like sometimes, I've been noticing they've been doing things where like they'll have like a special story arc that runs across all the different types of annuals. Like, for example, if there's a Captain America annual and a Spider-Man annual, like they'll do like a Spider-Man Captain America story or something like that, or they had the Atlantis attacks thing, or like the Evolutionaries War and all that kind of stuff. Like that kind of stuff seems more interesting. But at times it also kind of feels like this is just like, you might have the same writer, but you don't have the same artist, and the artist that they bring in is, sort of a far cry from what's going on in the mainline comic. But, once I found out that John actually wrote and drew this annual, I was like, I kind of need to read this now, because I can't say that I've completed his entire run without reading it. And he did 2 more annuals, but he wrote them. And I still want to read those too. Honestly, reading his work has been, reading all comics, honestly, everything that I've been reading recently has been really pivotal for me on the creative side, and it's something I really struggle with too, because there's the side of me that's the selling guy, and I'm supposed to be selling these comics, whether it's mine, my creator-owned books, or the books that I'm reselling for you guys. Or even the comics I'm publishing for you guys, right? Because, all that stuff kind of goes hand in hand. I think it's so important and critical to be aware of what's out there and to actually read comics. And I have to honestly tell you that there are so many people I know in the industry who don't read comics, like people who actually call themselves comic professionals and do not read comics. A lot of, dealers especially, like they just don't have time. It's not like, hey, I'm blaming them for not reading comics, but when you're around this stuff all day, it's like sometimes you need like a little bit of a break from it. In my case, I think reading comics is extremely important to just understand what's going out there, or what's going on out there, and to learn different techniques in storytelling, and to see what works as well as what doesn't work. And one of the things I've been struggling with right now with Eastern Shin is like, how do I end this damn thing? Like, how do I stick the landing? And one of the things I was actually really wrestling with, and I solved this problem this week, was I was working on a major scene between that involved the villain and the story, Baron So, and sort of like the setup for the final battle of the book. And without giving away any spoilers, originally I was kind of like, me as the writer, I know where he's going to end up at the end of the story, right? But the thing about villains is that they always believe that they always believe 2 things. A really good villain believes 2 things. One, they believe they're the hero. And the second thing that they believe is that they are always going to win. They're certain of it. They're always in a winning position. They're always like 2 steps ahead of the hero. They're always kind of like, ready to win. And if you see the hero get ahead of the villain, that's a problem. And so that's been something I was really struggling with. And so I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was like, why don't you go back and watch some movies where you see things set up a certain way that kind of complements what you're doing with your book. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, honestly, I can't think of anything that would do it like this. But then I was finishing up The Boys on Amazon because I hadn't finished it, like I hadn't seen all of season 5. So I actually started watching season 5 of The Boys, like, I want to say like 2 weeks ago. And I finished it on Friday. And I have to say, I was honestly kind of disappointed. I was, and I'll tell you why I was disappointed. The entire season did such a great job of building everything up. And there are a lot of shows that do this. At the very last moment of the show, they fuck up everything. Like Euphoria did this. Euphoria was such a great show full of really rich characters. And you get to the last episode and everything gets dumbed down and it becomes this like, Lifetime Western, special, and it's terrible. The last episode of Euphoria is complete and total shit. And I felt the same way about Mr. Robot. It's like Mr. Robot really dropped the ball much earlier on than its final episode. But even the final episode felt really anticlimactic. It was just sort of like it kind of dragged on, and I didn't feel like all my questions were answered at the end of it, and that was disappointing. And it's really easy to fuck up a final conclusion of something. Like I can't tell you guys how easy it is and how many times I've seen it done. And The Boys is a perfect example of this because, they're building up everything with, this, how they're going to take down Homelander and all that stuff is good. Okay. So they finally, do what they do to take out Homelander, but his end just felt sort of generic. It felt like something that we would have seen happen regardless. And it felt undeserving for the character. So, spoiler alert, here's what happens in The Boys. Homelander loses his powers. He goes up against Butcher, and Butcher kills him like he would anybody else. And Homelander dies the way we've seen other people die in the show, but not in a way that levels up the brutality that we've seen. It's just another death. It's actually pretty anticlimactic. I did not think that death was really what Homelander deserved. And if I were writing that show, I wouldn't have killed Homelander. I would have forced him to keep living without superpowers. I think that would have been a punishment worse than death. That would have been a much better ending for that character. And a couple days before that, I watched Kill Bill with Alan. We watched the both parts of it. And one of my favorite moments in that movie was when what's her name? Uma Thurman's character fights what's her name? Daryl Hannah's character. And Daryl Hannah's character is the one who lost her eye. And how does she beat her? She doesn't kill her. She plucks out her other eye because she had one eye plucked out by Pai Mei, and then, Beatrix plucks out the other eye. She doesn't have to kill her. She's going to fucking die anyway. And what worse death could you imagine? Like, it is such a morbid and frightening scene because she takes out her eye and she has defeated this adversary, and she has defeated her in a way that is so brutal that she doesn't have to kill her. She's going to die anyway because there's a snake in the room that's going to eventually bite her, but we don't need to see it. The brutality that's there is felt on an emotional level that, is such a payoff for us as the viewer. And honestly, I think it was absolutely riveting. I love what Kill Bill did. And, then a couple days later, I see the ending of The Boys, and I'm like, this is just generic. Homelander dying, and could have been any character on the show. It's like we've seen other characters die this way. We've seen so much worse happen to people, and Homelander just gets away with getting a crowbar put in his head and his head split open. Like, who gives a shit? We've seen people get dropped from the sky. We've seen an entire airplane full of innocent people fall to the earth. I think the best punishment or the best defeat for Homelander would have been simply losing his powers. Like, that already was enough. And, having, Butcher just kick his ass and then letting the rest of the government, take him down and arrest him, and him never getting his powers again, him never being able to control or do anything again would have been awesome. So that was where it kind of felt like it slipped up. And another thing that kind of lost it for me was, how they followed the comic, which, the comic was a lot more morbid. And all the characters die in the comics, and including Butcher. And, I just kind of felt like Butcher's death at the end was sort of forced. It didn't feel like it was necessary. And I don't think that it added any layers to the story. So I was really disappointed. But, seeing these things, seeing what didn't work helped me figure out what to do in my own writing so that it could work. And I read a lot of comics in order to study pacing. So right now, like I told you guys, I've been reading Frank Miller's Daredevil. That book is incredibly well paced. I mean, honestly, there is not one wasted panel in that entire run of books. It is just so incredible the way he lays out every single page. No wasted real estate, no wasted storytelling, no wasted dialogue. Everything just continues to move. And what was interesting was the latest issue that I read was actually Miller did the breakdowns and the layouts, but Klaus Janson actually did the finished art. So it still very much feels like a Frank Miller book, but it's actually Klaus Janson's finished artwork. So it honestly really fits the mold of everything that Miller has been doing. It does not feel filler in any way. But even so, Miller's arc on Daredevil is so celebrated because he was writing and drawing it and everything. And, he created Elektra and he did all this stuff. But, in comparison to John Byrne's Fantastic Four, which is just, it's such an amazing body of work. I mean, again, we're going to really dive into this and really look into it in a much deeper way when I get Jim Salerkrupp in here. But, I think that was probably one of the first times we've seen one creator both write and draw an entire book, but to go on for 4 years and do this and do an annual, a 40-page annual on top of his monthly responsibilities. I mean, that truly makes John Byrne a legend in comics, because of the amount of work that he's been able to do and the amount of jobs he was able to do while doing it. I find this stuff really fascinating. And, I just love looking at different things. There's definitely a difference between reading a book that was released in the Bronze Era as opposed to modern books. Modern books are a lot more diluted in terms of dialogue for the most part, and they're easier to digest. I want to say like the books that come on a weekly basis, for the most part, are pretty easy to digest, depending on the book, of course. But, the stuff that came out back then, I mean, like John gave you he gave you your bang for your buck in terms of dialogue and art, and everything is really balanced in there. I wouldn't say that the writing overcrowds the art or vice versa. In a lot of modern comics, when I say diluted, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's just sort of how things work out. And it's how pacing is done. Like certain things are sort of just left to the imagination, and I kind of feel like at times we're losing as the readership because of that. It's like, for example, there was an issue of The Punisher, and I brought this issue up a bunch of times. The most recent issue of The Punisher, there's a police chase happening, and a cop is chasing, a few criminals who are trying to get away, and they get, stopped by the Punisher. And while she's chasing them, there's nothing. There's just art. There's no dialogue or anything to kind of like slow us down so we can see what's happening. It all just kind of blends together. And I feel like we lost an opportunity there to get inside this woman's head and, see what's going on. We learned a little bit more about who she's chasing and why. Tell us about the criminals. Tell us that they raped a woman. Tell us that they killed a bunch of children, or that they're holding a bunch of children hostage, or something. Like whatever the case is, pull us into the moment. Bring us there. To me, writing in comics is supposed to heighten what the art is already doing. So like if you see really great art, the writing is supposed to heighten that art so that it brings even more presence to the art. So that's really kind of the things that I like to pay attention to when I'm reading comics, because it most certainly has an effect on how I make comics. But also, I'll be honest with you guys, as much as this is for work, it's also escapism too. Can a comic take me to a different place, and will I enjoy it when I read it? Am I going to be taken to some place where I'm not thinking about the shit that I have going on in my life? And can I stop thinking about the problems that are going on in my life for 15 minutes? Can a comic do that? And if it does do it, then it's a good story. Then it did its job. If I'm still reading the pages and I'm thinking about stupid shit that's going on in my life, then either two things are happening. One, either the story is not doing a good job of pulling me into it, or I'm not able to shut down enough in order to immerse myself in the story. And so sometimes I'll actually go back and reread stuff, because that can happen to me. Even when I'm reading Frank Miller's Daredevil, sometimes I pull myself out of the story because I'm thinking about other things that are bothering me, or whatever. My mind is preoccupied with something else. So, part of being a reader is also being observant and really paying attention to what is happening on the page at all times. So, I think that, this is an essential part of everything that we do. I mean, like, look, whenever I sell these books, you guys can buy them from anyone, and that's kind of the lesson that I'm learning right now being on Whatnot. When I go on Whatnot and I sell a comic for $2, I know just as well as you know that you could buy that same fucking book from any other vendor out there. There are probably a whole bunch of vendors who have a much better reputation than me selling that same fucking book for that same price, and you can get it much cheaper, and that's it. But when you shop with me, I am always going to give you guys an idea of what the book is about and why that book is important, even if it is only worth $2, because I'm reading a lot of these books. That's why I'm buying these books right now, because I promise you, in a year from now, maybe not even a year from now, maybe by the end of this year alone, I'll find a vendor who is selling this fucking book right here, which I spent $6 on. He'll be selling 15 copies of this for $1 a pop because he ordered 30 of them. He sold, the 15 that he needed to cover his costs, and now he's left with a whole bunch of them that he can't sell. So this ends up in a dollar bin, and I'm going to sell it for $2. I'm not going to try and get the max price out of it, which is $6, because by that point, it's probably not going to be worth that, right? Maybe if I got him signed by Mark Waid or Josh Williamson, that could be the case. But, for me, it's very important to be able to engage with you guys and tell you why these books are good, or tell you something good about these books, even if I didn't necessarily like them. Like, I've spoken about this ad nauseum about how much I'm not liking the current run of Spider-Man, and I don't think I'm alone on that. I think there are a lot of people right now who are not big fans of what's going on with Spider-Man. However, whenever I do reviews, it's not just to shit on the books, but to also focus on what they're doing right. And that's also been a big part of what I've been going through right now on Whatnot, is trying to figure out how to adapt in this very new environment, right? Because it does require a different type of selling. I mean, I have completely revamped how I've done everything. The way I used to do things is gone. That I've changed. So, now that I've, adapted and evolved, essentially, now I have to kind of learn how to do all the things that I was doing before, again, on a different platform, and build it from the ground up. And it's going to take time. There's going to be a lot of shows where I go on there and I just, spend 2 hours, screaming into the void in the hopes that somebody will come and pick up books. And it's okay. It's fine. It's part of the job. I mean, it's frustrating, I'm not going to lie. I was pretty aggravated today that I spent the whole week promoting the Spider-Man show, and, it's a Spider-Man show. You would think that I would sell a lot of comics with Spider-Man in them, but not a lot of stuff moved, and that's okay. I mean, that's just, you got to get over it. You got to have thick skin in this business, and especially on the sales front. But that part of me is definitely, feeling it right now. And I really hope that getting back out on the front lines and really focusing on my creator-owned stuff will reinvigorate that fighting spirit in me. I really hope so. And I'm really looking forward to getting out to Fan Expo for the Boston show. It's been a couple of years since I've been out there. And the last time I did that show was in 2023. And man, I was in a rough place at that time. It was a few weeks after my divorce, and my ex-wife had just informed me that she had a new boyfriend, and that she was going to be introducing him to our kids. And that really shocked me, and, the next day I'm off to a convention. And, I was kind of processing all that while I'm at a con and not sure how to feel and all this stuff. And so it was kind of a weird experience for me. I mean, I did okay at the show, but, it was, there was definitely some painful residue by the time I left. So, coming back to that is going to be kind of interesting. But, psychologically right now, the sales side of me is not at its strongest, and, a lot of people like to think that I'm this guy who goes anywhere and sells everything. But, unfortunately that is not the case. I have my days too, and my months. And honestly, it's been 2 months since I've done a convention. And there's also that thought is, did I lose it? Can I still do this? Is this going to work still? The last time I was going to a convention, I found out my grandma died and I had to stop everything I was doing and come home. So, that was tough. And, but the one thing I know about this business, and, the one thing that has always kind of kept me going, is just understanding that you have to keep going. Even when you're at your lowest moments, you have to just keep pushing forward and keep moving and learn and adapt. If you're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're never going to get anywhere. You really have to evaluate yourself. You have to really be you have to become as self-aware as possible and listen to your audience and listen to, what's going on. If people aren't showing up in my room, there's a reason for it. It's most likely, I'm going to tell you guys right now the truth. I think that my biggest problem with Whatnot is marketing. First off, not a lot of people on there know who I am. And second, I don't really do a good job of promoting my shows. I know this, so I haven't really figured out how to get better about promoting my shows, but I'm working on it, and that's really all I can do. So, that's part of it. And I've gone through lots of experiences like this. It didn't just happen that one day I got on a convention floor and I just started selling books and crushing it. I've had plenty of times where I've, hit these bumps in the road where I felt stumped and powerless, particularly with the first Eastern Shin graphic novel. When I first released that book, I couldn't sell it. It was really hard for me to sell this book. And, I was actually kind of expecting it to sell, to replace the single issues. I premiered it at C2E2 in 2012. And man, was that a tough show. Jesus Christ. All right. So let me tell you about this experience here. So C2E2 2012, what Repop was doing at that point was they were selling spaces in Artist Alley, but they were splitting tables. So imagine if you get a standard table, which is 6 feet long, but then you split that table in half with another creator. So in this case, I split it with Dennis Hopeless, who is now I think going by Dennis Halem. He's a Marvel writer, and he does a lot of stuff for he did Cable and X-Force and a whole bunch of other things. So him and I were splitting this table. And you guys know me. I like to stand in front of the booth, right? So I get to C2E2, and he's there. And Dennis does not like that I'm in front of his table. He didn't like it at all. And he actually complained to Mike Nigan, who is the head of Artist Alley, that, I was doing this. And rather than talking to me about it, or trying to figure something out. And Dennis actually just left. And then after a while, I was just kind of working, and then Jason Aaron walks by my table and gives me a really mean look. And Ryan Stegman, came by and kind of looked over at me and stuff. And so I kind of realized, am I doing something wrong here? What's going on? And then eventually Mike Nagan came by and he said, hey, you really got to be careful about, standing out in front of your table and things like that. You're sending people the wrong message and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, all right, I'm going to, I will be very, mindful of everything, and it's not that when I stand in front of my table, I'm stealing sales from people. I would never do that, because I think that's really poor etiquette. But, Artist Alley is such a confined space. This is back when I was just starting out. I didn't know any better. I was still kind of figuring it out. It's not like there was somebody who coached me and told me how to do comics and how to get into this stuff. But, kind of that experience really made me feel very isolated in comics, especially when I went to an after party afterwards and kind of felt like I didn't belong, honestly. And go figure, I was dealing with all this, and at the same time, I had just released, the Easton Shin graphic novel. Like I should have been my strongest at this point, but I will tell you right now, I was at my weakest mentally. I just was not there. I remember going up to CB Sapolsky at a networking event and handing him this book, and I never heard back from CB Sapolsky again about it. CB Sapolsky actually spends a lot of time in South Korea too, which is kind of strange. But either way, it was just kind of it was a weird experience for me, because the whole weekend I was like trying to sell this book over everything else, and it was so hard to close people on a $25 sale. Like I could not get people to pick this book up. Not at the same rate I was selling single issues. So finally, at the end of the weekend, I realized that, you know what? I still have these single issues. I need to sell them too. So why not sell the single issues and then upsell on the graphic novel? And then the rest is history. I just kind of started, I figured out that system that works for me, and I've been doing it ever since, But it takes those experiences sometimes to, to go through things. And I'll tell you, it's really funny, because the longer you're in this business, the more you realize that these little incidences that occur really don't matter. In 2017, I was at Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City, and I see Dennis Halem, or Hopeless, or whatever he goes by now. I walked up to him, and I'm like, hey, man, I just want to let you know we were booth neighbors back in C2E2 2012, and I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding between us. I didn't mean to get in your way or anything. And he was like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Like, he didn't even fucking remember where the fuck I was. And the funny thing about Jason Aaron, every time I see Jason Aaron now, I walk up to him and I say something to him like, hey, Jason, I really love what you're doing on Absolute Superman. And he goes, oh, thanks. This is not a guy who's sitting there thinking to himself, man, that Onrie Compen guy, I'm going to remember what he looks like, and I'm going to make a mental note of it and fucking keep him from working at Marvel. These guys don't think like that. They're off being themselves. For them, conventions are such a small portion of what they do. It's almost insignificant. Whatever Dennis was experiencing at the moment of C2E2 2012, he has long since forgotten about it. The only person who's been kind of thinking about it is me. And, after that moment, I kind of just let it go. Ryan Stegman, well, he's a pretty funny guy. We saw each other a number of times at conventions, and, we shared a laugh or two. A lot of people in comics are pretty easygoing people, and I kind of realized, like, a lot of the stuff that I thought was going on is really just up in my head. And maybe that's the case with Whatnot, but, I hope I can figure it out soon, because, it's definitely a journey. So Lorena says, you will get your stride soon. I wasn't a fan of Whatnot when it first came out, but I'm seeing an advantage in it. Glad you're my Whatnot dealer. I appreciate that so much, Lorena. The fact that you followed me along means so much to me. And I'm actually going to work on possibly setting up an account with Penguin Random House and with Lunar, so that I can start stocking new comics. So I am going to look into that at some point soon. So, the wrong message, it could be, to Jay's point, jealousy. Sure. I'm sure there are people that have been jealous of me in the past and maybe still are jealous of me today. And I'll be honest with you, there are people that I'm jealous of today. There are people I'm insanely jealous of today. But, I think about it and I kind of realize, jealousy is sort of like thinking to yourself that the grass is greener on the other side when it really is just the same thing. Like, for example, if there's another comic creator out there who is seemingly having more success than I am by working on a bigger project or something like that, the one thing that I always think to myself is, if I wanted that job, I would have gone after that job. Like, for example, there used to be this creator that I kind of had like a rivalry with, and it was probably some degree a rivalry that he knew existed between us, and something that I also kind of felt in the back of my head. But I probably allowed it to exist more in my head than it really did in reality. And this writer has gone on to work at DC. He's directed movies. He's worked at Marvel. He's, doing all kinds of different projects now. And, I remember thinking to myself, well, good for him, because, if I wanted to have this job, I would have gone after the things that he has gone after. Instead, what I've done is I put all my eggs into my own creator-owned properties, and, that's a harder road. I know that, but I enjoy the process of it. I know my job's not easy. I know that I made my job harder, but I'll tell you something right now. His job's not any easier than mine is. He's got to work on getting that next project lined up. And if he doesn't have it lined up, he ain't eating. So, that's we're all struggling in our own ways. And jealousy is kind of one of those things that you really have to check yourself with, especially as a comics creator, because you don't want it to consume your thinking. And the one thing I have that reselling comics has taught me to do is to not just to just let jealousy go. And it doesn't matter who the creator is. And I'll tell you right now, when COVID hit and conventions were canceled, I can't begin to tell you guys how small I felt as a creator, because I had no projects to launch on Kickstarter. And I just felt completely, I felt completely invisible compared to all these other creators who were suddenly emerging. And some of these guys were really cocky. Even more of them are not working in comics anymore, because once the COVID bubble burst, they were gone. And a whole bunch of things happened. The publishers have folded, their projects have sort of fallen into some sort of limbo, creative limbo, and that's it. A lot of this sometimes is just basically, putting your own feelings of jealousy or envious, feelings aside in order to kind of serve the bigger, cosmos of comics, and that's what I learned as a reseller. That's what the first thing that reselling taught me. And one of the first things I had to do, because once, COVID happened, I didn't have anything. So what did I do in order to stay present? Was I started interviewing creators, especially the people that I was jealous of. I locked them in. And then once I started reselling, I was reselling their work, and I was talking about it because I used my jealousy to basically promote them by focusing on the things that they had going for them and treating it like this is a strength that they have. And then I ultimately ended up learning from some of these guys. I think it's a really important thing. I don't have that second printing. I think that book's gone. That book, that was gone. Really, Jay. Garrett is somebody that I have an immense amount of respect for, and he is just the sweetest guy. I love Garrett Gunn, and I've seen him at so many conventions, and the way that guy has pivoted his career over the last 4 years has been insane. He is absolutely crushing it. I have so much respect for Garrett. I love him. Really good guy. I don't remember the last time I've seen him either, but he's just such a hot deal right now. He's just every single time he's at a convention, his table's always slammed. So, I got a lot of respect for him too. But yeah, it's one of those things where you got everybody's journey in comics is their own, and I think it's so important to appreciate and love what we're doing and what's out there, So there we go. My rant is over. I've actually dragged the show out to an hour. I can't believe I did it. I think that's the biggest feat and the greatest success that I've had. Guys, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Again, this was a pretty quiet week in terms of reviews, but next week will be, I think I have 10 or 12 books I'll be reviewing next week. So I'll let you guys know when I go live next week. It'll probably be sometime Thursday evening. So Thursday evening, we're going to go live and review comics. I'll be on Whatnot on Tuesday evening. I'm going to put together a brand new collection of stuff, and I might mix in some of my Spider-Man stuff. So if you guys missed the Spider-Man show today, you can come on and check out what I got on there on Tuesday. And yeah, thank you very much. I love hanging out with you too, Lorena. Jay, Nope, Lewis, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Anybody who's popped in today and said something or is just hanging out here listening, I appreciate it. It means a lot. You know, this is why I do what I do. And, you know, honestly, this conversation tonight has reminded me of why I got to keep going. So appreciate it. Everybody have a good night. I will let you guys know when I'll be live. So Tuesday night, I'll be on Whatnot at 7 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern. That's my normal show that I usually used to do on The Experience. And Tuesday night live, we're gonna keep that on Whatnot. And also, I've applied for an eBay license, so hopefully I'll be able to start selling on eBay Live soon. You know, I hope I can get. I hope they'll accept me as a reseller on there. And yeah, so I'll be on there, and then I might bring shows back to my channel once a week just to kind of, you know, divvy things up a little bit and see if we can do a little bit of everything. We'll see how things go, but the convention season is about to pick back up again, so it's going to get pretty busy soon. So anyway, I will see you guys later. You have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. Take care.